formed. It consisted of Councilor Matthews, Commissioner Lyons, Commissioner Sutton, who has joined us via phone tonight, our Operations Administrator, Greg Hamblett, our Community Development Administrator, Carolyn Johnson, and myself. So the working draft that we are presenting tonight, we received some direction from Council on May 24th. And basically that was to update the 2013-2023 Parks Master Plan to reflect resident and visitor interest and priorities, but include cultural resources and visitor community facilities. We also received direction to not add any new facilities to the plan.
This is Coco, and I called in.
Yes, you are, Coco.
Thank you.
Sorry, there we go. So what we did with this is, in addition to receiving council direction, we also had 2 subcommittee meetings. We had 6 online surveys. Commissioner Sutton, she worked the farmers markets and the neighborhood meetings. And we also had surveys at the Visitor Center, Coos Bay Museum, and Coos Bay History. Just so you know, over 500 surveys were obtained. So that was a really good effort. And all of that is included in Appendix A right now. And you may have noticed Appendix A has both the online survey and our hand tabulated survey. We're going to clean that up for the final draft of the public hearing. Okay. So going through this plan, how is it organized? What we have is the preface. And that was presented to you folks on May 24th. We have the acknowledgments, and then we jump into Chapter 1. Chapter 1 talks about the plan prep, public participation, and the plan organization, and that's kind of neat and concise on one page. Then we jump into Chapter 2. Okay, it'll come up. Chapter 2 talks about plan context. It talks about the location. We're in the city of Coos Bay. The demographics, it references what they call the SCORP, which is the Statewide Comprehensive Outdoor Recreation Plan. That's important to be eligible for future funding. It discusses key plan elements. And then one thing to note in the public surveys is that there was a large focus on waterfront and trails. So in the key plan and elements, we have connectivity, and it discusses the trails. We have Empire, Mingus, Front Street Boardwalk. You may have noticed that there's some lineal footage of trails identified in here. I think they're off. We're going to check those. Also in this working draft, there was several text boxes. I think there was a total of 6. We're going to discuss that at the end of this presentation. And those text boxes, basically, we're asking for feedback from Council and the Parks Commission. Chapter 2 also discusses park recreation and cultural facility sites and improvement recommendations. So the improvement recommendations for these are basically, the priority was set per the survey. When we were looking at these, you folks may want to readjust those priorities or may want to have the Parks Commission recommend rearranging these. But they are here, and right now they're set as it was tallied in the surveys. So all of the parks are identified in here, and there's several pages of that. Then we talk about the city-owned cultural facilities that we don't operate. And then we talked about the privately owned cultural facilities. So that wraps up Chapter 2. Chapter 3 discusses the framework and the future. So it talks about the council leadership, the community vision, and then the goals of this plan. And there's 4 goals. Goal 1 is to enhance existing facilities for public enjoyment and safety and consider new facilities when opportunity and financial capacity are available. Goal 2 is to develop citywide branding of facilities. Goal 3 is to pursue sustainable funding sources. And Goal 4 is to build and enhance relationships for plan implementation. And then last but not least, Chapter 3 discusses funding options. So we're going to go into the appendices, but what we've done here is the old master plan was comprised of 90 pages, and we've taken those 90 pages and we've condensed it down to 30 or less than 30. And I think that, sorry about that. So we have 3 appendices. Appendix A lists all the surveys. We're going to get that cleaned up. tally it, so it's going to be neat and orderly. Appendix B discusses design guidelines, and Appendix C is funding resources and opportunities. And I might just hit the pause button. Any comments for me or questions so far? Okay. So going into our questions. I'm just going to have to read the questions, it looks like. That's okay. So our first question is, and for reference, it's on page 20 of your Parks draft or page 88 of your PDF. And so it's guidelines for new development in Appendix B. Council directive, no new facilities in the plan. Survey note interest in expanded or new facilities, and council has discussed the Empire Hollering Place area plan that may warrant creation of a waterfront trail. If there's change of financial staffing circumstances and council future desire, Appendix B guideline standards would provide this guidance. So our question for you, retain or omit Appendix B and related references in the public hearing draft. And we can do this a couple ways if you want to have a discussion now, or we can ask all these questions and then come back at a council meeting between now and October 20th. I'm looking at Roger.
So what we're hoping is that we'll go over some of this tonight and then give you a week where we can come back if there's any changes. I would share, though, that I don't believe this is an appropriate place to have the Hollering Place mentioned in there. Right now, Hollering Place master plan is embedded in the development code and is not, it could be for private development and maybe not public. In addition, the council and the Urban Renewal Agency has a desire to create a master plan in Empire, and I don't believe that it should be embedded in this document before that document is completed.
I agree with Roger. We also don't have the entire council here, so taking a week to go through all of this and then come back, I think, is the better option.
Okay. Did you want me to go through the 6 questions that we're looking for feedback on?
I defer to the other councilors.
I think we should.
Okay. The second question, it's the text box, page 9 in the working draft, or page 77 in your PDF. And it discusses Empire Hollering Place Bayfront Boardwalk. Question, is there interest in considering addition of language to include consideration of a Westerly Bay Boardwalk in the Empire Master Plan discussion? Should I just keep going through the questions?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
fine.
The third question discusses the pedway. It's page 15 of your working draft, or 83 of your PDF. Is there interest in expanding pedway discussion to indicate future design and development of a cohesive public plaza? Question number 4. It refers to the Front Street Boardwalk. The question, does council wish to expand the discussion in the public hearing draft to incorporate pieces of the Front Street blueprint recommendations and the boardwalk plans of the History Museum and Coos Bay Village Boardwalk areas? These 2 areas are not owned by the city. However, the public's use and connectivity provided will be a valuable visitor attraction and resident amenity. Question 5, private facilities not owned by the city. Cultural facilities not owned by the city contribute to leisure and economic vibrancy. It's recommended discussion of these facilities remain in the plan, and if there are other similar private facilities, they be added to public hearing draft for future discussion. So the question related to that is, should private cultural facilities not owned or managed by the city be carried over the public hearing draft? And then there was one more that was in the staff report, and that's conferral with others for input on cultural resources. So the executive directors of the Coos Bay North Bend Visitor and Convention Bureau, Coos Art Museum, Coos History Museum, Egyptian Theater, and the library director could be invited to provide feedback regarding the expansion of the cultural resources discussion in the working draft plan. Is this something you would like staff to coordinate? So that's all I have. Any questions?
Thank you, Jennifer. Council, do you have any questions or discussion on this? I have, I don't know if it's a question or a recommendation, but under Mingus Park, the priorities, I personally don't think that the tennis courts is at the top of the priorities at Mingus Park. We don't have a working bathroom in Mingus Park right now, and the little kids area floods for about 9 months a year. I think those are priorities over tennis courts.
Okay.
When we mention cultural resources, I know we've talked about the Visitor and Conventions Bureau, the History Museum, and the Art Museum, and others. I feel like we're remiss if you're going to have a meeting. I think you should have the two tribes represented just to have their perspective if we're going to be talking about cultural resources.
Okay.
If I may, I'm going to add information from our city attorney. Under page 23 of 24, it lists funding resources or options, and it lists them their fees and charges. It's basically talking about user fees. And in Oregon, we have recreational immunity provided to us as long as we don't charge fees. I don't believe city-county insurance would support the city in charging user fees, because you lose that immunity and we don't have coverage. In addition, there's a requirement here, requirements of public access dedication of waterfront area with new development. That is really a development code issue and not a parks issue.
So Roger, are you proposing that when it comes back to us that those are striked?
I do.
Okay.
And then I have provided some comments to staff on some maybe possible small changes, like taking out the Memorial Day Parade as an event and making sure we have other events in there that are, adding in the Dolphin Theater as one of those cultural places that wasn't listed.
Yeah.
I'm curious about on the community vision recommendations, the updates for the scout cabin. Because if it says support of the scout cabin improvements and use was supported by many. However, if you look at the survey, it's the least visited resource.
We can look into that.
The only other comment I wanted to make is I challenged Coco, who I think is on the phone with us, if we were going to be able to get a decent sample set of surveys given the short window that we had. And so the fact that we got 500 surveys, I know there was a group of, a small but mighty group of diligent volunteers. So I just wanted to thank Coco and the group for all of their efforts to really, that's a great number.
It was a heavy lift by Commissioner Sutton.
No, and I think that proves the point that these parks are really important for livability in our community. And to what Roger said, you know, so it is one of those things that's really something that no matter what your income level is, you can enjoy. And I would hate to see that tarnished, but we've got to figure out a way to make some improvements because we have seen degradation over the years. So.
The only other thing that I would add is in Appendix C, and I understand it says on the top it's a working document, but there's several private grant and foundations that aren't listed on there, and I would be happy to share those with you if you want to contact me.
Thank you.
And other than that, did anybody on the Parks Commission want to comment?
I would just say it's a working document that we're working on, and we'll have another Parks work session to review it. So it's been a heavy task, and it's a difficult thing to do each year, but when we go after these grants, they look for that document, and that's why it's so important that we're looking at this process.
Thank you. Anybody else have any comments, questions? Thank you, Jennifer, and I'd like to thank everybody that worked on this. It's well overdue, and now I just hope we can find some funding to make this a reality.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question. Could we have a show of hands of how many
Can you come up to the microphone?
We can't hear.
Can you come up to the microphone?
Oh,
We can't hear a word out here that
being said. I don't know, can we have a show of hands of anybody that can hear? Oh, well, maybe more can hear than I thought. There's a whole bunch of hands that are not going up.
I apologize for that. I will speak louder, and if Nicole can maybe look into the speakers.
We'll talk into the mics closer.
Was it the presenter that you missed, or the council, or both? Presenter or the council?
No.
Okay.
I just got a question. Where did you send all the surveys to? Yes, for the local residents?
They were online and advertising Friday updates, and we had those at farmers markets.
Oh, that's funny because I never seen any of that. So I live between here and Coquille. Still have a Coos Bay resident. Have no idea what any of this survey was. I don't have a clue.
Do you get the
There's a lot of
Friday update?
And there's a lot of us that live out in the rural areas that don't get any of this. You know, I mean, I'm out in the country. We get spotty internet service. Especially like right now.
We're not allowed to vote either.
Like right now, we had our line cut.
Sir, do you have a suggestion for
So
where
it's
we
been-
should have posted the
It's been
survey?
almost 2 weeks now. Yeah, I mean, there's got to be something set up for those of us in the rural areas.
Do you have a suggestion?
I don't know what it is.
Okay.
Because we're so far out of town. And like, we come in once a week. You know, I'll come in on Tuesdays, do all of our shopping. And there's nothing here other than to go shopping and then go home.
Well, if you have a suggestion of where we should post those surveys, we'd love to have a solution.
Well, at least, I mean, I know with us, we go to Buy Mart a lot or somewhere in Walmart, just on the reader board somewhere.
Okay.
Just somewhere that we, as rural residents, you know.
Councilor Stevens asked if you subscribe to the city newsletter. Are you guys subscribers to that?
I didn't even know there was a city newsletter.
Yeah, there's a
That's what I'm
city,
saying.
it's a
We're
weekly
so far
update
out
that
we
goes.
don't- We're out
Well,
of touch with everything that's
if you go to
here in town.
if you go to the city's website, you can subscribe to that. That will come directly every week. And then there's a lot of information that comes through that, not only that newsletter, but other information about things that are coming up. So it's easy. You just go to coosbay.org.
Coosbay.org, and there's a place at the lower part of the
The bottom.
website to sign up.
We'll look into that.
This is Commissioner, pardon me, this is Commissioner Sutton. I was wondering if I might
The survey was
add to
done.
that.
The survey was done in the last month.
Right, and this is Commissioner Sutton. I don't know if you can hear me.
Go ahead, Coco.
I just wanted to address that in the surveys that we did, there were 3 meetings that were done to get people that were from out of town, out in the county, people that didn't have internet access, and because of a lack of funding, because we didn't get a grant to do further outreach for this, we did do 2 different farmers markets, and I know that was put on KDOC, I believe, and some of the radio stations that we were at those events taking those surveys, and there was a sampling of people from out of the state, people that lived out in the county, people that lived in Reedsport, Bandon, and other areas. So that was the best effort that we could have with the budget and time to get a survey response.
Thank you, Coco.
Just before you start, Janice, Roger, are the survey results in that draft plan and everything available online as well? So if folks that are here tonight wanted to know more about what's happening, where would they find that? They're not? Okay. But the working draft that we're looking at is available
It is.
online?
So I run the Coos Bay Visitor Information Center, and I would just recommend for those who are from out of town, every now and again, it might be a good idea to just stop in at the visitor center and just find out what's happening. Our volunteers have a lot of information about what's happening. we did the out-of-town surveys at the visitor center, so that would have been a good place for you guys to find out more. And we got 100 and something surveys just from our visitors over that 3-week or 4-week period, so.
Thank you, Janice. And I certainly apologize that you guys missed out on the survey. I would suggest that maybe if you want to give your contact information to Roger after the meeting, he can make sure that you're getting that Friday update every week. Moving on to the next item, discussion regarding the historical timeline and analysis of potential library sites leading to the current site location. I believe Roger will start this out.
Tonight, we're going to provide you a recap. That recap will include why do we need a new library, what steps were taken, what sites were looked at, as we began looking for a site once the council in 2014 decided that should be the direction that we should go instead of fixing the current facility. And then we can talk about what site was selected, the work undertaken to do site schematics or plans, the vote that was taken in May, the results of that vote, the results of a poll that was recently taken by and funded by the foundation, and then some sites that people have suggested since the vote, and then talk about maybe some next steps. Like the Parks Master Plan, you will be revisiting this when you have all of your members present. With that, I would like to call on Jennifer Wurzing, our Assistant Public Works Director, to kind of give us a recap of what occurred in 2014 when the seismic structural evaluation and geotech work was done on the current library site.
Okay, I'll try to speak into the mic.
Eat that microphone, Jennifer.
I'm going to. Just a little background. The 16,600 square foot library was originally constructed in 1965 with a 9,000 square foot addition along the west side in 1998. The original construction was founded on timber pile capped with concrete and a structural floor slab and building superstructure. The addition was founded on steel pile and also supports a structural slab system. In 2014, the city contracted with ZCS to investigate the building settlement, investigate existing structural systems for deficiencies, and prescribe repairs to correct the settlement and deficiencies. The effort was solely for structural work and did not include or address space planning, fire and life safety, ADA code-related items, energy efficiency, security measures, finish upgrades, facility modernization, or mechanical, electrical, and plumbing systems. Throughout the engineer's investigation, it was determined the existing piles were inadequate throughout the entire structure, and the groundwater fluctuation appeared to be deteriorating the top of the timber piles. Based on structural loads and soils, the recommendation to fix the structural issues were to install an array of micropiles. Back in 2014, that was estimated to be $6.3 million. We've escalated that to $2022, and that's $9 million. The micropile would essentially remove the existing foundation from service. In order to install the micropile, the entire building would have to be removed and or gutted. This would just not be limited to walls, but also include casework, plumbing fixtures, electrical, and floor finishes, which would all need to be replaced after the micropile were installed. The costs to replace these items were not included in the original assessment of $6.3 million. It was also anticipated that this work would span for 18 months, in which the library would have to be closed. In ZCS's opinion, the repair of the library would not be money well spent by the city, and it was their recommendation the money be spent on a new building that had updated mechanical, electrical, and plumbing systems that can meet the current technology and square footage needs. Additionally, ZCS recommended a monthly monitoring program to track any settlement. The city contracted with SHN in 2015, and what they found out that there's kind of a rocking occurring with the foundation system. This observed settlement and rocking continues today, which is attributed to slab and pile cracking and ceiling and roof and wall damage. This damage is what can be observed. You can just go in the library and see it, and will likely continue and cause and compromise our newly installed roof and cause future leaking. Any questions? Okay.
Any questions for Jennifer?
Okay. Thank you.
The council at that time, after hearing those reports, had chosen not to reinvest in the current library to fix the foundation, but to rather begin looking for a new library that would serve the community for decades to come. From there, a steering committee was created. The committee comprised of representatives of the council, city staff, the library board, library foundation, and Friends of the Library. A subcommittee of that group was put together to look at possible locations. I put together, and I apologize, it's a rather long PowerPoint because there was a lot of sites that were looked at. To start out with, how big of a site do we have currently? Currently we have 7 parcels that equal 2.1 acres. That includes 2 sections of street that were vacated years ago, both North 6th and Bennett. The first thought was, could we simply purchase the mortuary on the corner, build the library on where the parking lot exists today, and then once that was built, could we then make that the parking lot? Conceptually, that was an easy idea. What we found when we looked at it is that the mortuary is outside of the urban renewal. That is important because we were looking at using urban renewal funds for any potential property purchase. In addition, the entire area is in the FEMA flood zone and in the tsunami inundation area. That's important because back in 2014, 2015, it was against Oregon Revised Statute to put critical public infrastructure, such as a library, in a tsunami inundation zone. So we began working and we came up with criteria. We needed at least 2 acres. We needed it to be in the urban renewal district, one of the 2, due to funding. We wanted it located outside of the FEMA flood zone and tsunami inundation zone. I don't know if I'm going to get the next one. There it is. And we wanted a location with suitable soils so we didn't have to, we could eliminate the need for a deep foundation in an effort to minimize cost. That was similar criteria that was used not that long ago when we looked for a new site for the downtown fire station. We were able to find a site that was located outside of the FEMA flood zone and the tsunami inundation zone, and we did find a site that had suitable soils so that we could get down to bedrock fairly easily. That site, for some reason, that site itself was not in the downtown urban renewal zone, but we had an alternate funding for that site. When we look at using the search criteria within the downtown area, there are some challenges. And I'm sorry this is not working as well as I'd like it to be. Most of the downtown properties, it's pretty easy to see they've been developed. Most of the downtown is a former marsh, which was filled in by dredge spoils from the bay, which requires most new structures to have an extremely deep foundation. The other big challenge is that the majority of the downtown is within the FEMA flood zone and is in the tsunami inundation zone. Regardless, we still looked at numerous locations. One of the first places we began looking was, is there a place between the current library and the fire hall? If you look at the block right behind, you'll notice that it actually goes uphill a little bit. There are a number of homes that are sitting up on that little ledge. We thought, is there a possibility of purchasing a few of those properties and placing that on that hillside and then using the lower lot where the library is at currently and making that the parking lot? So the property, the accumulated properties is big enough, it's 1.37 acres. But while the property is outside the flood zone, it is still, a portion of it's inside the tsunami inundation zone, and it's also outside the urban renewal district, so that took that property out of consideration. The next property was the former Mccauley Hospital property. And some of you may know that we've looked at this site on a number of occasions for a number of different possibilities, including the former fire station. Most recently, we received, or the paper received, and the council may have received, a proposal to put the library on that site and site parking across the way. So I'll share with you what was revealed in the former evaluations. First, the property is in the urban renewal district. And most of the property is outside the flood zone, but it is in the tsunami inundation zone. The property by itself isn't large enough, as a good amount of the property is a steep hillside. More importantly, the hillside is a known slide area. For those that looked at the old Mccauley Hospital, on the backside you would have seen that the hillside had actually slid into the building. Currently, there's a large amount of rock trying to hold back that hillside. And additionally, there's a sewer main that runs through a portion of the lot. But more importantly, there's a large box culvert that runs through a portion of the property. That 4x4 culvert is the Mingus Park drain system, and that drain system hooks up and then eventually goes out into the bay by Curtis. So that property has not moved forward for a number of different options. Even when Advanced Health bought that property with the idea that they were going to develop apartments across the street, they were going to limit the use of that to a parking lot. We also looked at the former ACS building, or which now is the Public Defender's Office, which is across the street from the current fire station. The property is outside the flood and tsunami zone, although it is adjacent to other property which is in the zone, but again, it's outside. There would be increased cost to redevelop it due to the existing buildings, but probably more importantly, that really takes it out of the consideration. It's outside the downtown urban renewal district, and the property isn't big enough by itself to support the development. Additional property was looked at in the downtown area, and that is the Park building. There is 2 lots there, because one lot's not big enough. One has 2 buildings on it, and one's a multi-story building. The properties are outside the flood and tsunami zones. It's a very touchy thing. The 2 buildings would increase the cost for redevelopment because they would have to be torn down. There are actually 3 properties because there's a right-of-way there, but the 3 together aren't adequate size. In addition, it's really not the best practice to have people crossing streets to get from a parking lot to the development. And the other thing that really takes it out of the mix is it's outside the urban renewal district. We looked briefly, and I guess I should share that many of these properties we looked at, we did not talk to the owners. We were just looking to see if they were suitable first. This one is the Church of Christ. It didn't take long to look at this one, mainly because while it was outside the zone, I'll just get to the 2 properties combined wouldn't provide adequate space, and it is outside the urban renewal district. We did look at the former Murphy Motors. It's been the former state police. It's been a number of former things. I think currently now it's HGE and a couple of other businesses. There are properties on both sides of the street and multiple buildings. At the time we looked at it, they weren't being used and they were up for sale. The properties are within the downtown urban renewal district. The existing buildings would increase costs for the redevelopment. The 6 parcels combined don't provide the space, the 2.1 acres needed, or 2 acres. And the properties are outside the flood zone, but inside the tsunami inundation zone. So we began knowing that we weren't going to find a place in downtown that met the search criteria of the group. We began looking at Empire locations. This one we refer to as the Vega property because all of the parcels identified, with the exception of the right-of-ways, are owned by Mr. Vega. For reference, it's behind the Gussie's, what was known as Gussie's or Spotlight Bar, and behind what used to be Empire Cleaners. So it's a dead-end street. The property has never been developed. There is sufficient amount of land. The property is within the urban renewal district. The property is outside both the flood and tsunami zones. The things that detract from it is the streets, Shutter and Morrison, are undeveloped. There are no utilities to the area, as it's never been developed. There is a creek and wetlands in or near the property, and there would be increased development costs due to the topography of the property. Another site that was looked at, again, 2 properties across the street from each other, and that is over by Norman. To give some reference, it's just south of the current armory. And I would say now one of them is the site for Taco Bell. The property is within the urban renewal district. The property is outside of both the flood and tsunami zones. Unfortunately, not sufficient amount of available land. So that was taken off. We also looked at the armory site. As most people know, there hasn't been a lot of activity there for several years. The property's inside the urban renewal district. It's outside both the flood and tsunami zone. There is more than enough property. In fact, it's just over 5 acres. The area, the detraction is it is considered a brownfield due to lead contamination from the indoor range. But the thing that takes it off the table is the state's not willing to part with the property. We actually think this would be could be used for a number of different places, but it really is a nice site and would be a great location. We also looked at the current property owned by Cardinal over by Ackerman and Newmark. The property is within the urban renewal district and of course outside both the flood and tsunami zones. Unfortunately, there's not sufficient amount of available land for the new library there.
Excuse me. I happen to own that property, and there's 5.3 acres there, and it's zoned C1.
Not that,
It is in the urban renewal zone.
correct. We're probably talking 2 different parcels, sir. In addition,
400 Ackerman Street, that's mine.
thank you.
Cardinal Services is on the corner. I own the 5 acres behind it.
Correct. We also looked at property off of Wallace Street. At one time, the city owned 3 small lots, and then the large lot, which is a used car dealership. I will say that the city no longer owns those 3 small lots. We've sold those off to the owner of the Dodge dealership. But we looked at that property, and while it does meet some of the benchmarks, the reality is there's not sufficient amount of property there. Because of the large vacant parking area, we also looked at Cranberry Suites, but only for a moment. While it met some of the criteria, See if we can get it up there. The lot is just a little over an acre. There we go. Next, we look at the former Gussie's, or the Spotlight Bar. In addition, we looked at the old vacant, which now is a vacant piece of property, but it was a former gas station to the west, and then in addition to the residence behind that former lot. So that one does meet a lot, in fact, it meets all the benchmarks. The property's in the urban renewal district. The property is outside the flood and tsunami zone. The property is sufficient size to meet the needs. Unfortunately, the results weren't well when the Urban Renewal Agency tried to purchase the property on more than one occasion without success. And the council had determined that they were not willing to use eminent domain to try and purchase the property. I think the purchases were attempted over a course of a couple of years without success. So that property was taken off the table. The next property was on Ocean Boulevard next to the Dodge dealership. One of the lots is a large undeveloped lot, and then the adjacent lot is a metal building. The property is in the urban renewal district. The property is outside of the flood and tsunami zone. It is just large enough, just a little bit larger than what was needed. And the Urban Renewal Agency did decide to purchase this property because it's the first one that met all the benchmarks that didn't have a lot of detractions. It was after that the council president asked about property in John Toppett's Park. A deed search was done and revealed that there were no deed restrictions that restricted the building to be built there. And in fact, that property was acquired by the city of Empire. And then when the Empire became part of Coos Bay in the mid-60s, it was transferred over to the city of Coos Bay. What I have highlighted here is the actual size of the proposed building on the lot in the locations being proposed. That property is in the urban renewal district. It's outside the flood and tsunami zone. It is sufficient size, and it is owned by the city of Coos Bay. And I did want to point out that the city did have another building built on in that area, formerly known as the Neighborhood Facility Building. So the council needed to make a choice. The council had purchased a piece of property and then was considering another. The council consulted with the Library Steering Committee, Library Foundation, Friends of the Library Board, the Community Coalition of Empire, and the Parks Commission while considering the two options. Ultimately, the council moved forward for the John Toppett site. From there, I'm going to ask Jennifer to come back and say what happened next as we began looking at design plans.
Roger, before you
can I
do
ask-
that,
Down a little closer to your mouth, please, as it's up by your nose, but we can't hear it.
How's that?
And can I ask a question also before we go into that? When you're looking at those Empire sites, the parking is critical, size is critical because we do have parking issues in the Empire area as far as sufficient parking goes.
That is correct. The city does not own a public parking lot currently in the Empire District other than the boat ramp.
and Roger, I just want to clarify, the three criteria that have to be met is any of these pieces of property, they have to be in the urban renewal district, they have to be out of the flood zone, and they have to be out of the tsunami induction zone. Is that correct?
That is correct. State law in 2014 precluded buildings to be built, critical public buildings to be built in flood zones. I will share and was going to share that that law has changed because some communities, such as Newport, Yachats, and others, it precluded them making any public structures in their cities because most of their cities were actually within that zone.
But just to be clear, when we were making these decisions and the council before us that were making these decisions, that was the criteria in place at the time, and that was state law in place at the time.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Okay. So once we were given direction to investigate the southern portion of Topics Park, we did 3 preliminary analyses. We did a biological evaluation, we did a transportation impact study, and we did a timber survey. When we got the results of those, there was nothing in there that prevented us from maybe taking this to the next step, which was hiring a consultant and moving forward with some planning. So back in fall of 2021, we advertised for architects. We received several submittals. The recommendation committee, comprised of steering committee members and counselors, interviewed the consultants and recommended Hacker Architects. So we contracted with Hacker, and their task was to prepare what we call schematic design. It's like a 30% level design, and that was so we could get enough design that we knew we had a viable project and we had good cost estimates, and so we could present that plan for the May 2022 vote. So how did we get there? We had several meetings with town hall meetings with the community, as well as multiple meetings with the steering committee. We had to build the program. We had to understand what our needs were. That meant we had to understand the spaces needed for meetings, for kids, tweens, toddlers, technology and library services, and then reading and collections. Once we had that, we knew the square footage that we needed. So then we were able to look at the 3 areas over there and determine what was the preferred location. So there was 3 at the very beginning. There was one right to the, west of the Armory building, and we called that the, what did we call that? The Bluff. The problem with that is it needed access. Norman there ended and had to be extended. We needed parking. There were no lake views, and there was going to be extensive tree removal. The next location we looked at was the clearing, and that's just north of the Armory, in that area up there. That also needed access, constructed. It needed parking, and it had filtered lakes in the view and had some environmental impacts with respect to wetlands. The final location we looked at was the Ridge, and this ended up being the preferred location, and that's the area identified up on the exhibit up there. It had high visibility from the park entry. It had expansive views of the lake. It had the minimal impacts to existing wetlands compared to the other 2 locations, and it was the location that had the most access to daylight and solar energy potential. There was also a shared opportunity for parking because there was already existing parking there. So overall, it seemed like it was going to be the least impactful option out of all 3. So once the location and the program was chosen, we had to develop other items. And again, we did that in a town hall and steering committee format. We did the planning basics where we discussed how was the library going to be entered, what were the oversight and interior views, the acoustic zones. We looked at the site conditions. We looked at the wetland impacts, the landscaping, the setbacks, and the views. And then we looked at all our building options, basically the footprint layout. Would it be 1 or 2 stories? It ended up being 2 stories. And then we had multiple layouts for that 2-story building, which, again, the town hall committee with the public and the steering committee weighed in and directed that decision. And so at the end of the day, we prepared 30% our plans, which they call schematic designs. We have those done and finalized.
Jennifer, if I remember correctly, also we wanted a site that had the least amount of impact on the park for the visitors that currently and the residents that use it now. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, great.
Okay.
So with choosing that site, the council also chose to sell the Ocean Boulevard site, and it has been sold. We have entered into a contract, and the final signing will be later next month, excuse me. So let me move back one slide here. So in May of this year, the matter went to the voters on an election on consideration of a $20 million bond. To be clear, the project was more than $20 million. The Library Foundation had already said that they would be raising funds for a portion of it, but we're asking the voters for the rest. The vote came back. Only 36% of the registered voters actually voted, but of those that did vote, 60.55% voted no, and 39.45% voted yes. Now, what we heard going up to the election were some opinions. Some wanted the new library in the downtown area. Some didn't want the library in the park. Some didn't want the new library placed in Empire. Some wanted to repair the current building. Some wondered if libraries were even still relevant in today's world. Some thought that the cost of the project was too high. And to be clear, there were some that had some of those opinions, not just one. The Library Foundation contracted with a firm to poll the voters in an effort to better understand why they voted for or against the ballot measure. And I believe I can't see Sammy. JD's online, so we do have the person that conducted that survey, and he can provide you with some results.
JD, are you online?
I am.
You're
Hopefully
welcome.
everyone can see and hear me.
We can.
Is that correct?
Yes.
That was a very, very informative presentation about the kind of the historical relevance of this process. What I really wanted to talk about today, the survey was done, or the most recent survey was done and closed on Sunday. And so I presented a memo of initial survey results. So everyone hopefully should have that piece of that memo, which I'm going to refer to. Is that correct?
I don't believe so.
We have not received it.
Okay. Can we share my screen?
We're working on it.
Okay.
You should be able to share your screen.
Okay. Under open share tray, I do believe. Okay. And so hopefully it will come up here in a second. Operating all the way from beautiful Bend, Oregon. So can people see my screen?
No.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Nicole, don't we have our AT tech here that can help us with that?
We do. I'm not sure what
Has
to
to come
use.
from
At the very
him.
top of your screen, there should be a little window with the share arrow.
Correct. I opened that up and I just allowed Microsoft Teams to...
So you'll have to select the window that you want to share, assuming you have just a screen.
Council, we do have it in an email if you want to look at your email.
How about that? I just allowed the preferences.
No. The council does have the memo. Go ahead and once you go through it.
Okay. So let's first talk about the methodology. So the survey was completed from September 9th to September 24th. And from 1,931 identified registered voters, we collected 182 completed surveys. And a couple of criteria were a part of that. They needed to be a Coos Bay resident and then a registered voter. to have to walk through a series of questions about how they voted in the May election. So from that information, or from those self-selecting questions on the survey, we came up with the vote disposition. So here on the first table, you can see that from the survey, 66% of survey respondents said they did vote in the May 2022 election. 13% said no, and 21% would not identify whether or not they voted in the election. Part of the shortcomings of exit polling and really asking people how they voted, looking backward, is a difficult process. People don't generally like to express their opinions about something that's already occurred. And number two, some survey respondents really don't appreciate the privacy of talking about how they voted. But regardless of that, they were then asked whether or not they did vote yes or vote no on that May bond measure. So from that, 26% said they voted yes, 26% said they voted no, and again, 47% would not identify their disposition on that ballot measure. But of those people that voted no, we asked them a series of questions that tried to identify how important various elements or issues within that bond measure, how important were those things in their vote disposition of voting against the bond measure. And as the memo shows, the highest level of importance was really the new location of the library was the most important factor of the ones listed in why they voted no. The second most important factor was the tax increase. So if you look at those combined percents, very and extremely important, you see about 80% identified that the new location of the library was very or extremely important in their decision to vote no on the bond measure. Number two, the tax increase, about 68% occupy that very important or extremely important fields of how the tax increase and how important that tax increase was in them voting no for the bond measure. Any questions about that first table?
No, go ahead.
So on the flip side of voting no, we walked through the same series of questions, but these were among people who stated that they voted yes. So you can see the listing of reasons and their level of importance really flipped on that table. So 98% feel library services are important to the community. And that was really the most important reason why they voted yes on that. Number two was the information about the bond measure. So they felt that they were well informed or the information adequately described. There we go. It's finally up.
Can you enlarge it? Oh, great.
There we go. How's that?
Better. Thank you.
Perfect. So let's go down a little bit further. I'm on the table. This is pretty sensitive scrolling. Let's see if I can. I cannot. The screen seemed to have frozen on me. So I'll just continue and people can look along with the memo. So among those people who voted yes, pretty decisive opinions on the reasons why or which reasons were most important to them. There we go. And then in that large percent or that large block of people who did not or were unwilling to disclose whether or not they voted, and then whether or not they, what their vote disposition. So two groups were then able to fall into the hypothetical section, which was identical to the vote section, but the wording was, how would you have voted on the bond measure? So as those people who didn't disclose their vote disposition, they were asked the same series of questions. So again, on those block of people who didn't disclose how they voted and whether or not they voted, but they did disclose that they would have voted no on the bond measure. So taking that group separately, basically the same reasons and their stated value of importance were identical. The two flipped, the tax increase and the new location, but those were both the top reasons in terms of level of importance, matching the other section of people who did disclose their vote disposition. And again, walked through the people who hypothetically would have supported the bond measure. So again, these people, because they did not disclose their vote disposition or whether or not they voted, they were given hypothetical questions. So these were the people who indicated how important were these series of issues in their decision to support the bond measure. And again, you do see a little bit of a difference, including the 9/11 communication facilities. That was pretty important to people who said they would have supported the bond measure. And then second, the importance of library services to the community. So very similar kind of validated results of both of those populations, people who disclosed their vote disposition and then people who didn't. And then the final table really just underscores the disposition or the voter statistics from the survey. So you can see there are dramatic underweighted categories of people. So under 35-year-olds, only about 1% completed the survey. And then you have on the other side of that, 65%, or those 65 years or older, 55% participated in the survey. By political party identification, Republicans, Democrats, Independents. I think registered Republicans in Coos Bay are about 29% or 25%, and the survey was 19%. Democrats were 29%. The survey was 24%. Independents are about 5%. The survey was 15%. And then those other political parties, 41%. Registered in Coos Bay, the survey had about 29%, so combining the 3 and the 26. Then we have some voting history that will probably provide some crosstab information once the report is finalized. I thought one interesting component of the survey that I did not include in the memo was a question was asked, would you support or oppose a library bond measure if in the future, and then there were a series of questions. One was, the library remains downtown. 56% of survey respondents said they would more likely support a library bond measure if the library remains downtown. 30% said they would be undecided on a potential library bond measure. And then 14% said they would oppose the library bond measure. So in terms of open-ended comments provided, I think one of the major goals of this process was really to identify why people voted no and what would maybe encourage them to vote yes in some future time. So as we unravel the open-ended comments, a lot of those pieces of information will provide a little bit more depth of knowledge of why people voted no, but what are the reasons why they would then vote yes. So any questions thus far on the survey? I did not know today's agenda would be so survey heavy.
I had a question.
Sure.
I know you try to keep this arbitrary, but I think it is important from our perspective as a council carrying this information forward. How, was any geographical area identified? Like, was this heavy downtown, like percentage-wise, did it coincide with what our community residency is in each area, in each district, like downtown, Empire, East Side? Because I think that could also, I mean, if it was a survey of predominantly people from downtown, that could have an impact of people on the survey results. And vice versa, if it was heavy Empire or heavy East Side.
Yeah, that's an extra. That's an excellent piece of information there. I do believe I can merge some information from the various lists. Kind of how we constructed the methodology. We took a registered voter list, and then we took people with accessible email accounts, and we merged those two lists. So I believe there is some geographic data within a couple of those lists. So that may be possible.
JD, I had a question. When asking about the location of the facility, did you happen to ask, was it the fact that it was in Empire Lakes, or was it the fact that it was in Empire? Did you drill down to that granular level?
We did not drill down, no.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for JD? Thank you, JD. I appreciate it.
Not a problem. And with that, I will exit the room.
Rob, I think we'll get to some comments later after we go through all of this. I know you have your hand raised, so I think that we'll do that shortly. Is that right, Councillor Miles?
That is correct.
Okay.
So were those comments that you wanted me to address, or am I free to go?
You may stay on the line in case there's a question directed to you.
Okay, sounds great. I'll just turn off my video then.
Since the election, a couple of other sites have been suggested that be considered. One was the World newspaper. That was one that came up a few times online. So I went ahead and evaluated it. Might be surprising to know that, of course, it is in the downtown urban renewal. It is in the flood and tsunami zone. But the property is less than 1 acre. And the building itself is 8,000 square foot smaller than the current library. Another building, which had been formerly occupied.
Roger, can I interrupt real quick?
Yes.
On the World building, isn't there, the condition of the building is not that great either?
That is my understanding from past employees of that worked in that building. It has seen better days, and there's been a lot of deferred maintenance. Another building that came up, and for those that have been around a long time, it was the original JCPenney's in downtown Coos Bay and the JCPenney's shoe store. It's been a number of things since then, but most recently FCR, a call center. That building, it has combined, the two buildings have 40,000 square feet. And I think the new library that was being proposed was just a little over 31,000 square feet, if I remember right. It is located in the downtown urban renewal. It is inside the flood and tsunami zone. Parking lots, depending on what you call a block, is either a half a block or a block away. And the building is nearly 70 years old. Although it appears to be in good shape for the age, you know, looking forward, if you're looking for redevelopment of an existing building, you need to, if you're wanting it to last, you're looking at a 50-year horizon. So in order for this building to be considered, if you were to change the criteria, it would need structural and geotech evaluation. And I would remind the council that it wasn't that long ago, just on the other side of the alley, that we had to do a lot of work to pin up a foundation of the Egyptian theater which of course was built 30 years prior to this building.
Roger, is it safe to say that, I know that the law has changed, so you now can build within a flood zone, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Is it safe to say that if we had, tonight, I know we can't make a decision, tonight we pick a location like that, I would imagine that the expense for a seismic event and driving piling would greatly increase the cost of the library. Is that correct?
If you were to build a new building in the downtown, let's say in that location, I'm assuming that it would need a deep foundation and it would be more expensive.
Okay, thank you.
If you were to, let's just say, purchase that property and remodel that building, should it be structurally sound, you would need to bring it up to current seismic standards and to current floodplain requirements. So there's expense there too. So, when you think about next steps, I think really, and it's not a decision you're making tonight, and I'm sure you'll be talking at your next work session in a month or two. The real questions for the council are going to be, does the council want to reconsider the site selection criteria? Do you want to consider locating a new library outside of an urban renewal area? And if you do, then the challenge will be trying to find a funding source to purchase the property. Do you want to consider locating the library in the downtown in the FEMA flood zone or tsunami inundation zone? If you make that decision, of course, you're going to lose two critical components. One is, besides the survivability of the building, should a large event occur, you lose the components where the building could also serve in a post-disaster relief effort. And of course, we wouldn't want to move the 911 communications center closer to the water. Does the council want the steering committee to explore additional potential sites? Does the council want to explore repairing the existing facility foundation, upgrading the building? Of course, doing so will require locating services or shutting down the library for at least a year and possibly a year and a half. Does the council want to explore value engineering of the current scope of the building, proposed project in John Toppett's Park, in an effort to reduce the overall cost? Those are just a sample of potential things that you could consider. Obviously, it's a big decision, and one that shouldn't be taken lightly, and one that you should take some time in considering. So we were going to postpone having, answers to those questions, but might be an appropriate time to take some public comment.
Thank you, Roger.
I thought it was going to be hard to cite a wastewater treatment plant. Who knew that this one was going to be harder?
Okay, we'll take public comments on this topic. The first name on the list is Steve Skinner.
Three minutes? Okay. Hi, thank you. I'll try to speak clearly and loudly and slowly. So,
Can you speak into the microphone so
okay.
we have people online also?
That better?
Yeah, you're probably going to have to face that microphone.
Okay. I didn't get involved in this up until the park site was discussed. And when I first learned that it was the site that you've chosen to go after the votes on, I had two concerns immediately. One is my personal thing, that I think it's a crazy idea to put the library in the park. I don't like the idea of marrying the call center and the emergency services for a building in the park. I don't think that site will accommodate either of those. They are both needed, I understand that. My second concern was, because I'm a landscape gardener for 36 years, I'm pretty familiar with looking at a piece of land and seeing what's there. And I did not understand how you could put a building of the size that's proposed on that site. I believe that site is way too small to accommodate that building. So we went to the buildcoosbaylibrary.com. We found a thumb drive. If you blow the thumb drive up big enough on a desktop, you can get a floor plan for the building. It has some measurements, doesn't have all the measurements. A couple of them are blurred, so you can't really see what they are. There's no cardinal points on that, so you don't know where north, south, east, or west are. So it was kind of difficult to do, but there's enough measurements there that we came up with, we think, an accurate, relatively accurate number of how wide and how long the building is going to be. So there seems to be so I have those numbers. I went out, I measured with those numbers twice, 2 different instruments. I counted the trees within that.
1 minute.
Yeah. Pardon?
One minute.
Yeah, 1 more minute.
I only have 1 minute left?
Yeah.
Well, I'm not going to be able to touch anything then.
You were 3 minutes.
Because I can't even get to the Mccauley site. Anyway, there's a big disconnect between those numbers and something being tucked into that site. I spent an hour with Carmen last Monday afternoon doing a walk around there. We could not agree. He kept whipping out his phone and showing me virtual reality. Virtual reality is not reality. I have the map, the numbers in my hand. He just wasn't buying it. I wasn't buying what he was saying, so we agreed to disagree. We talked for 45 more minutes anyway, but about other possibilities. So that's one question I'd like answered, because I just don't see where it's happening. If you go and measure with the measurements given by that site, it's going to cut down over 200 trees. The building's going to go into the wetlands, into the lake, and into the swamp on the other side. So that's my big concern. As for the Mccauley site, I told Bob Moore, because I met with him right after the vote for an hour, I said, just saying no to something is not forwarding the conversation. I will help you try to find another site, preferably downtown, because I knew that there was a lot of sentiment for that. The Mccauley site jumped out to me because it had a building there for 40, however many years it was, 33,000 square foot building, quite nicely. Yes, it's out of one zone, it's in the other. If you look at the map, it's barely in that zone. If you look where the building sat, it's already 6 or 7 feet above that. It's lower on either side, but the actual hospital site does sit up. So if it does get water on it, it's probably going to be about that deep. So to me, it was worth looking at. Yes, it may be an unstable hillside, but I argue you could build the building into the hillside and use the building as a retaining wall. And I went to 2 architects, Crow Clay, because they have a history of doing volunteer stuff. I asked them to come up with a design that would fit that site and be under $20 million, well under, hopefully, and they produced the map you saw earlier. My vision, when I first looked at that site, was a little different from that. I think if the building, particularly on the east side, what I saw was a block on the corner by the skate park, a bigger block on the other corner, the east corner, that could be pushed way back into the hillside to help stabilize it, and then a flying sky bridge essentially connecting the 2 blocks. That lifts the building off the ground, so you don't have to worry so much about something sliding down there. It increases the amount of parking. It's visually a very exciting design, possibly iconic if it was done well. It might win a lot of awards. It's south-facing. We can do total solar. And the reading, we thought maybe the reading room could go in the Skybridge part. The stacks would go in the bigger part that's pushed into the hillside, and administrative would be in the other block. That was just a thought. So whether it's feasible, I don't know. But I wanted something that would grab people's attention and try to get them involved in this process. So that's kind of where I went on that one. So, and one site you didn't mention is across from the Parks block. There's a whole city block plus a unvacated street there that's just sitting there empty. Not as convenient, but it sure is out of the tsunami zone.
You're talking about
And
the
it's-
former armory site?
Yeah, it's a LLC designated to be a park, but I don't know if that site was ever explored, and I think it's big enough.
It was on the map.
So, yeah. And the other thing is, I would like to know when you did the biological study.
Mr. Skinner, you need to wrap it
Yeah.
up here pretty soon. We've given you some leeway here,
Yeah,
and your
okay.
time's up.
Anyway, I've got plenty more material if you want to have me back.
Thank you. Next name on the list is Scott and Terry Churchill.
Hello, I'm Terry Churchill. I just wanted, we already talked about earlier, we got a lot to talk about, but I wrote some notes. I like the idea about the library in the park. I was thinking as I was sitting back there, the only thing I think that probably people were concerned about, I see it every day, we live in North Bend, I go over there all the time, is the homeless people, transients. I know there was a death at the top, at that park. I haven't even gone in there, but I do think it's an awesome, awesome idea. If only the library could be utilized as more than just a library, would be awesome. Like community center, a wedding venue if it is in the park, something like that would actually come across to the citizens even more than just a library. Because someone was right, or whoever talked about it, who goes to the library anymore? Like seriously. Yeah.
Well, I think
For babies, I used to take my babies to the library all the time, but, you know, I don't know. Yeah. So that was my piece. Let's utilize it for community center, because I don't think Coos Bay has one. North Bend has one, but I don't think that that's even very functioning. We're brand new back to the community. Scott grew up in Coke Hill, graduated. He just retired. So we came back and we're looking at being business owners. So that's our intention on being here tonight, is try to figure out what's going on around here. And
Thank you.
good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next name on the list is Keith Toppitz, but I don't see him in the room anymore.
He had physical issues, he had to leave.
Okay, thank you. And Jim Barons.
We saved the best for last.
Good evening. Roger, I don't recall the farm and ranch site. Did you mention the farm and ranch site off of Ocean? The Northport or North Point property next to Farm and Ranch on Ocean where FedEx is?
You're talking about Cascade?
Yes.
No, because it's not inside the urban renewal district.
Okay. That should also go on your laundry list for your site selection committee. I don't believe that when I talked to the listing agent 2 years ago, when you folks were going through this, he had not been contacted.
No, it's not inside the urban renewal district.
Okay. I don't think the world rises and sets on the urban renewal district sometimes, but now I'm going to contradict myself. Down on Newmark, danger, do not enter, building deemed unsafe for human occupation. Okay, that's the Gussie's building. Just a little bit down the street, property deemed substandard. You can't read the rest of it, it's torn off. Building's covered with graffiti. It's had 2 arson fires. The city's in the process of kicking the building owner to fix the building. I haven't found a better candidate for eminent domain. It's on a main road. It lines up with Morrison, which is a residential collector. Morrison is supposed to go on the Safe School Sidewalk program whenever the money shows up. So we now have a sidewalk. It's a long walk from the boys club, girls club, but it's still doable. It's close to a middle school. It's close to an elementary. I have a lot of confidence in our library director that it will work, that she's not going to have problems. I'm not too thrilled about 20 million bucks, especially when I see this many hands up that say we need a library. Okay, we are the 6th poorest county in the state for income. 6th poorest, all right? Now I pay about 13 bucks a month for a library. Do you know what I pay for? I pay for this lady to go to the fire station and hand out books once a week. That's what my $13 goes for. Now, do we need a $20 million building? No. Needs to be toned way down. I think that's value engineering, right?
Could be.
Okay, it needs to be toned way down. Needs to be toned down to reality. It's not a designer statement. It's a library and a gathering place, and it's supposed to be an emergency preparedness building. I haven't heard a single dime of federal state money for this. Not a penny. It's all on us. If it's all on us, it gets cut back. Jack it up, go get some state and federal money. You guys are here wanting this. You're going to have to go out and create some rain. You're going to have to bring some money in. Okay?
Time?
Thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
Just to comment on Jim's statement, Jim, I don't know if you know this, we actually did. We have a lobbyist, and we did look for some state and federal funding for this. Unfortunately, we weren't successful with it, so just I wasn't sure if you were aware of that.
I'm aware of it, and I also know that you expressed your legislative priorities in a council meeting, and funding the library emergency preparedness money was not on the list for you to approach the League of Oregon Cities to lobby for.
Correct.
Wasn't even on your top whatever list. So you need to make it rain.
I think also that list comes from the legislative priorities come from the League of Oregon Cities. Correct me if I'm wrong, Roger. So basically, they give us a list of things to focus on. I wouldn't want you to think that this council doesn't take the future building of the library. We don't take it seriously, because we do. We've been discussing this since I've been placed on council since 2016. But just so you know, we don't get to put our priorities on that list. That is a list that comes from the League of Oregon Cities, and then we rank what we deem as important.
Councilor DeNovo, just for clarification, the list I think that he is talking about is what we recently discussed. We actually had this as a priority during one of the sessions. Was it the longer session a couple of years ago?
Yeah, I think we're talking two different things. One was our priority with our lobbyists. The second one is the League of Oregon Cities list that's provided to us. That is a shared list of concerns by all cities in the state. And individual cities don't get to put their own project on that list.
Right.
But to Councilor Kilmer's point, it is in our goals and our priorities as a city, correct?
That is correct.
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Next. Another public comment, come on up.
I keep hearing that
Can you
downtown
state your name,
site is
please?
an urban renewal district.
Can you state your name?
State your name, please.
Speak in the mic.
I keep hearing that the downtown
Ma'am, we need your name.
area suggestions are not inside the urban renewal district. The urban renewal district in Empire was expanded to take in John Toppett's Park. Now, it looks to me like the same thing could happen downtown with urban renewal. That's point number one. Point number two is that we were told during the pandemic that the library was not essential. The library managed with Zoom, we've heard it tonight, taking the library books out to the people and so on. I think it needs to be one of the steps is, do we need that big a library? Given that I can put everything that library has on my cell phone or my e-reader and a whole bunch more. So I'm not sure we need a library of that site, and we don't have an urban renewal district downtown that can be amended. So there's a couple of good points that I would like to bring out. Smaller in the urban renewal district. And the third point is you guys, we especially bought that piece of property next to Vergers to put the library, 2.1 acres. But it didn't meet the vision of the city council. They sold the property and want to put it in the park. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. I am opposed on those three positions.
Can we get your name before you leave for the record?
You want my name?
Yes, please.
Charlotte Kepke.
Thank you. Do we have any more public comments before? Come on up. You already had your turn.
Hi, my name's Ashley Ingberg. I have been born and raised here in the Empire area. Went to Madison, went to Sunset, went to Marshfield. The fact that people think that our library is not something we need in this day and age, I think comes from a place of privilege. I think it's incredibly important that we put it in the Empire area. We have a huge suburb there of kids that don't get to downtown. You know, their schools are right there. You know, our beaches are right there. I think that Empire needs something good going for it. I know that homeless and transient is an issue, but I also think that could be because of location at Devereaux. Devereaux could be moved, could change that area possibly. And those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Come on up.
Good evening. My name is Paul Poresky, P-O-R-E-S-K-Y. I'm used to spelling it, sorry. And I think the library is essential in many ways. Maybe not on the grand scale that was proposed for John Toppitz. Personally, I'm opposed to taking a wonderful asset that was given to the city by the Toppitz family for the purpose of being a park and taking part of that park away, hundreds of trees, leveling ground, paving parking lots, etc., in order to put a library there where there are other suitable spots. And I think that the fact that Cheddar needs to be paved, that could happen. You know, there's little things like, oh, yes, 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 and then there was a little nitpicky thing at the bottom, the street needs to be paved. But otherwise we have enough room, it's in the urban growth boundary, et cetera. So I think we could relook at some of the things, some of the places that we already have ruled out, maybe reconsider them in light of changed state laws regarding flood zones, et cetera, and come up with something that's agreeable to everyone. And just as an aside, I love Empire, I love downtown, and I also love East Side. If we put a library in Empire, we're doing a tremendous disservice to the people who live in East Side, and I think they're important too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Roger, just for clarification on the parcel that was selected, that, as you stated earlier, that was not deeded through the Toppitz family. That was deeded from the city of Empire when it was consolidated into the city of Coos Bay.
That is correct.
Do we have any other comments? Mr. Skinner, you've already had your time. Thank you. Kurt, come on up.
Thank you, Council. My name is Kurt Van Wert. I'm presently the foundation president for the library. I have lots of comments tonight about some of the things that were said, but maybe I'm just going to focus on the sites a little bit and talk about that. I just want to let you know, first off, I think we all know that the library has structural deficiencies and has a lot of other problems as well, too. I mean, that's a given. We have to do something with that. One of these days, it may not be habitable. So it's an issue that has to be addressed. And the second thing is, no site's perfect. I mean, all those sites that we looked at, I mean, you could find something good about all of them, and you could find some deficiencies about all of them. Not an easy task. You just have to end up finding the best one that works. It's unfortunate that Mr. Skinner wasn't able to see better plans. I would encourage him to talk to city staff and look at some things. I know one of the overheads that Roger had over there had the outline of the library in the park, and that's to scale, if I'm not mistaken. And so it really shows where the library sits. And I know he has some expertise as a landscape architect, but Hacker architects were hired too. They took a look at the topography in that site. They made sure it didn't infringe upon the wetlands. They made sure that it didn't go into the lake. So a lot of considerations were taken into that spot as well. There was a question about deep foundations and fill areas in downtown. It was certainly something, it wasn't a primary consideration, but you know when you build a library, we've talked an awful lot about cost, and I know we want the cost to be as low as we possibly can. So you have to take things like demolishing buildings and getting rid of that refuge and site preparation into consideration, and the soil conditions and topography of the area. And although they weren't primary considerations, there are things that I think you need to consider. About 5 years ago, when an architect reviewed the Coos Bay site right now, he basically said if you want to build in one of the fill areas, a deep foundation is going to cost you an extra $600,000. 4% a year, it's probably, and probably more than that now, is probably close to about $800,000 just for a deep foundation. The Tapas Park doesn't require a deep foundation. So, I mean, like I said, there's just a lot of issues. I would say that people that are involved with the library consider the library a community center. We don't consider it just a library. I will let you know that the plans for the new library have included larger meeting rooms, commercial kitchen, there's innovative centers. It's not just books anymore. It's not just stuff that you can get on your cell phone.
Time's up.
My time's up?
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I appreciate you letting me give comments.
Kurt, can I ask you a question? Can you remind us how many people visit the library on an annual basis?
You know, it's a difficult question because we have pre-COVID, pre-pandemic, and post-pandemic, and so although library hours were reduced during a lot of that pandemic time, and they've just been opened up to the same hours that we currently had pre-pandemic. 10 to 6, Sammy's behind me if I don't get this right, she's just going to 10 to 6, Monday through Friday, and Saturday, is it 12 to 6? Damn, I passed the test. Anyways, pre-COVID, we were probably looking in the neighborhood of about 20,000 people a month. During this time period right now, because of COVID, we're less than that. We're probably in the upper teens. Sammy would know better, 13, 14,000. It gets, you know, yeah, people come in there for story time. They come in for meetings. They come in there for science kits. They come in there for silly stuff like Lego Day with the kids. I mean, there's a lot of traffic that goes through that building.
So I'm sorry, pre-COVID was 20,000 people, and now, as we're coming back out of COVID, it's probably 13 or 14,000 people a month.
Don't hold me to them to listen to, but off the top of my head, that's kind of guesstimate. You know.
Per month.
Yeah, per month.
Yeah, I'm not holding you to it. The point I'm trying to make is it's valued and it's used in this community, so that's the question I'm really asking.
Yeah. Okay.
Great, thanks.
Yeah.
Just a follow-up question to that, Kurt. What percentage, has the library done a study to determine what percentage are multiple users during that month time?
I
know it's hard, but
it's a good question for Sammy or maybe Bob here, because he's currently with the library board. They may have a better idea. I will leave you with telling you that the foundation has about $3 million right now to put towards a new library. on the difficulty with the foundation raising grants is that it's difficult to get a grant if you aren't going to build a building. I can't go out to somebody and say, give me $1 million grant, and they say, well, have you got a bond to build the building? Or do you have finances to build the building? So we're about $3 million right now. We're trying. We're doing our very, very best. Okay? Thank you again.
Thank you, Kurt.
So if the voters did approve a bond measure, would the library steering committee continue to seek funds which could potentially reduce the overall cost?
I'm sorry, I wasn't listening.
Yes.
Speak closer to
Your microphone, you have to get into your mic.
The question was, if the bond were to pass, would the Library Foundation continue to seek those grant funds which could potentially reduce the cost to voters?
Yeah, we've actually interviewed two grant writers already, one in Eugene and one in Ashland, and talked to them about being under contract to write grants for us. But there just aren't an opportunity to write very much. The foundation did get one grant recently for $100,000 that had to be used and reused for children's library and stuff, furniture and things like that. They could be used in the new library, right? Not just built into the current one. So no, of course we would continue to do as much fundraising as possible.
Thanks.
Do we have any other public comments?
I have one critical thing.
Mr. Skinner, you've had your time. You've had your time. Thank you.
Is there a way he can submit that? You could email. You could email it to us.
Do you guys want to allow him to come back up? It's your decision.
I think we have other people that wanted to
Okay.
speak.
Come on up, sir.
Although I would yield to Mr. Skinner, it seems like Al Zimmerman, resident of Coos Bay. I came here tonight because I care about libraries. And as I heard the presentation on the analysis of the election, I hear the comments tonight. I live close to John Toppit's Park, just on the north end. And I think what's clear, the park site should be eliminated. We have really received no public support from the survey or what you're hearing in support of let's convert the park to a library and emergency center site. So let's eliminate that to start with. I would recommend that. There are other sites. We're in a city hall in which the building itself is elevated. That's what you do in a site like this. So downtown gets the traffic and the use. It's central to East Side, Empire. We need to do some deeper study.
Thank you. Bob, come on up.
Robert Moore, City of Coos Bay. I also am the president of the Library Board of Trustees. And I don't have any sales pitch to give anybody tonight, but I do have a couple of points that I want people that are in the room to be clear on. And the big one is that the Coos Bay Public Library, which is part of a larger library system, recently I checked out a book and it was delivered to me from Brookings Library. We're part of a larger system. But within that system, and on the entire coast of Oregon, Coos Bay Public Library is the largest library, period, both in square footage and in the amount of materials that are checked in and out of it in terms of our collection. So as we're trying to face what we're going to do with a building that's failing and how we're going to have a library for the future that will sustain what we're currently doing as the largest library on the Oregon coast, it will come with cost. And yes, to the gentleman that suggested we follow what we did with City Hall, that comes at a cost. we already know that the voters don't want to pay 20 million. You want to put it in downtown, let's talk more realistically about 30 or 40 million and how much the voters are going to want to do that. So that's what has to be kept in mind. There's a real perspective here that we can just go back and take another site and with whatever deficits it has and fix it up, but that will come at a cost. The library site in Toppets Park belongs to the city and costs the city nothing to acquire it. The library site that was sold out on Ocean Boulevard did cost, and now that money has been recovered. There is no way to come up with an easy solution to this, but we have to keep in mind that what we have is a gem. It's the best library on the Oregon coast. We have a responsibility to the people that use it from all over, not just from Coos County, but even from further down the coast. There are people that come and use this library from all parts of the coast. And we have to keep in mind that our service is to the citizens of Coos Bay, but it's also to the larger community. And so I just ask everybody not to jump on a bandwagon that you think that we have an easy solution out there. There is no easy solution to this, but
time's up.
Everybody is working to support this. I shouldn't say everybody. There's some people who are really against it. I know that. But there are a lot of people that really want this to happen, and I think we can accomplish it working together.
Come on up.
Hi, I'm Ida Jo Gates. I am a member of the Coos Bay Library Board. And I also am a person who kind of thinks outside the box. And being a former employee at SWAC, I know that there are people who say, go to a concert at Hale Center, it's too far away. We need to serve Empire, we need to serve Central Coos Bay, we need to serve East Side. And just thinking outside the box, maybe 3 smaller buildings with a community center in the center of the city. Doing some drastic thinking here that will convince people that we need a library because we're going to put it in their community so that they can use it. And I think we need to be very, very careful about who we're serving and really looking at the need for the library and putting that out there, because people I talk to don't think you need one. And we've got to be our own ambassadors and get it out there. We really, really need to do this for the good of the people of this community. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, is that all the public comments? Okay, I want to touch on a few things that have been said. One, Terry, I encourage you to go on the website or the Coos Bay website and find the drawings of the new library, because it is much more than a new library. It's a community center. There's a very large meeting room that, if you look at it, it could definitely be utilized for weddings if that was your wish. Okay. And then my question was that Mr. Skinner mentioned that there isn't any real drawings available, but I'm pretty sure that the 50% design is on there somewhere, correct?
And if not, we'd be happy to give it to him if you wanted to come down to the city and ask for him.
Okay. And then lastly, to Ida Jo, to your comments, there has been a discussion about doing satellite library sites. And I don't know, Roger, maybe you can speak to what the added cost is to that?
The problem is the added operational cost. There isn't sufficient funding to operate 3 different, and in this case, what was suggested, 4 different centers.
Thank you.
But there was a discussion with regards to transportation with CCAT and the bus companies in enabling routes for after school as well as throughout the day.
Council, do you have any more comments?
I appreciate your comments, Bob, on the coastline services. I was contacted by the library director in Gold Beach, the Central Curry Library, and and his board were very concerned because of the infrastructure and support that Sammy and her team provide for the coastline system. And not just that, things like Dolly Parton Imagination Library and other things that Sammy and her team lead for our whole region. So I appreciate that point.
I just wanted to thank everyone who came out tonight to speak. So I think that there's a lot of passion around this subject, and it's an important subject. I will say this group knows Empire Lakes was not my first choice. My first choice was the Gussie's building because I thought it would be the impetus for redevelopment in Empire. The reality of the situation was we couldn't get the building. The owner didn't want to sell it, so that just took it out completely. I got behind Empire Lakes because of the fact that for me it's not if but when we will have a major event here. And Empire Lakes seemed like the most logical place to me because it could be a community gathering location and we could secure the 911 call center there. I still struggle as a counselor. I know we're not making any decisions tonight, but for me personally, I have a really hard time wanting to put a building that we're going to spend $15, $20, $30 million in a flood zone or a tsunami induction zone. I feel as a counselor it is irresponsible to do that because we want this building to last a lifetime, right? And so again, with that said, I'm super appreciative of all the comments this evening, and I look forward to having more I know we'll have more conversations about this, but I look forward to more conversations.
Can I just add something to what you said? And I think that's probably the thing that makes me the most dizzy about this conversation is that, you know, when we sit up here, we're representing all of our citizens, and I am thrilled to see so many people passionate about this, regardless of whether we agree or disagree. But the thing that is the hardest for me, that makes me, is the hardest thing, is putting it back in a place. I hope there's not an event. I'm not going to live, you know, as long as I want this building to last. And I know with the designs and all of the things that we do putting into this building from today, that I'm hoping that this will last as long as, because I know you all think I'm very young, but I remember sitting on the planter boxes as a kid waiting for my mom to come pick me up because I lived up on 3rd Street, or not 3rd Street, but Market Street. And I went to the library all the time. So it didn't even have the new edition on it. It's important, and it is something more than just a library. It's not just a library. It's a community gathering place. So we want this to be something that lasts my lifetime, my children's lifetime, and hopefully their children's lifetime. And so we want to make the right decision, and that's the hardest thing we have to do as counselors, is making the best decision, which may not be right for someone, but is hopefully right for the majority.
Thank you, Stephanie. Carmen, I'm sorry, I just noticed you were online. Do you have a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in, mostly echo what's been said about the participation in this conversation by members of the public. It's just absolutely integral to us moving forward, to hear from everybody, hear different points of view, and I'm listening. I just want everybody to know that. I am I would say very partial to the location in the park. I'm on the Parks Commission. I value parks very highly. It's, for me, pairing something like a wonderful public asset in a natural setting is extremely calming and peaceful, and creates an environment where those two visitors, either for the parks and for the library, can commingle and maybe blend a little bit more. And I really do love that site. I think that the drawings that we've had so far are spectacular, and I'm very thankful for how far we've gotten down that vision. That being said, you know, I'm hearing everything, and I'm not sure where we're going to land. And I think Kurt Penmore mentioned it really well, that every site is going to have something that is not going to be perfect or won't align with everybody's vision. And so we're tasked with a very difficult decision. And when it comes down to it, we're hoping that people look at the value of the library and what it provides for not just us, but for our children, for other people's children, for other members of society who are coming up and down this coast and need resources. It's just such a valuable asset. And I hope that wherever it ends up landing, even if it's not your preferred location, that we can agree that libraries are extremely important. They have an immense amount of value, and that we need to make something happen. And so obviously the council here is tasked with finding the location and the option that will give it the best chance for passage in a bond measure. And I'm ready to have those conversations. But thank you all for coming here tonight and sharing your thoughts and concerns, and we'll see what we can pull together. There's a lot of people working on this, and we've been working on it for a really long time, and it obviously the work is not done yet. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Carmen. I would also echo what everybody else has said about thanking everyone for coming and giving their comments tonight. It's very much appreciated. And my hope is that at least 2 points came across tonight. And number one is that we definitely do need a new library. We're now in, I think, year 8 of a consultant telling us we had 5 years left in the current library. So we're well past that. And I think it's clear that there is that need. The second point I hope came through is that there's been many, many people who have volunteered many, many hours for, what is this, going on 8 years now, towards this project. We don't take this decision lightly. I think everybody here has said it. It's a difficult decision. For me personally, I think the library is so important that I will support any site that is viable for the new library. I don't have any prejudice towards one site or the other than what is best for the community. And then lastly, I just want to say, Mr. Skinner, I appreciate you offering us a possible solution. That is very much appreciated. And I hope anybody else will keep doing that, because we just want what's best for the library and what's best for the community. And with that,
since we are gathered here together, and Mr. Skinner had one more point to make, can we bend the rules and hear what he has to say?
I don't have a problem with that if you guys don't. Sure, come on up, Mr. Skinner.
2 minutes.
Yeah, the most critical thing is if you have any interest at all in taking a second look at Mccauley, the deadline that the owner of that property gave me is Friday. So I talked to him this morning. He's willing to extend that out if there is some interest, but somebody needs to call and say, we're going to take a second look.
What do you mean by interest?
And that property is being offered to the city free in exchange for a land swap. So there's no money involved. He wants to build housing. He'd like to get another site that's probably a little better for housing than that site. So it's being offered free of charge in exchange for another site. Those are the 2 most critical things that you needed to know. I could go on about other things, but
thank you.
That's good.
Any other comments? Okay, with that, I'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everyone. Oh, did you up?
Scott Churchill, CHURCHILL. I wanted to get with that Carmen guy who's in charge of parks or whatever, right? If you're gonna put it on there in the park, who's getting the money from the trees? Where's that money gonna go?
It would probably go to support the project.
That's a problem, it's not saying it's going to.
It's city property, so the
It's
money would
city
go to the
property.
city.
So it would be up to the city to figure out what to do with that money.
That's correct.
Okay.
Okay, meeting adjourned. Thank you.